Now I'd like to introduce Dr. Diana Chua, who's going to be talking about surrendered and stray dogs in Australia, an estimation of numbers entering municipal pounds and shelters and their outcomes. Diana has served as a senior education officer in the government sector in Singapore for 13 years, prior to embarking on a mid-career switch to the field of veterinary science at the University of Queensland in 2009. Since then, Diana has been working to provide quality veterinary care to companion animals in the community. She's currently a practicing emergency veterinarian at Animal Emergency Centre at, oh gosh, that's a big word, Woolloongabba? Yeah, okay, Woolloongabba, okay. She's conducting research in the field of animal welfare for her master's program in the University of Queensland, hoping to be able to make a difference in this area through her research work. Thank you very much, Diana.
Good morning, everyone. So basically, it is with pleasure that I share my research paper with you today on surrendered and stray dogs in Australia. And this is a topic that's really closely aligned to the theme of G2Z Summit this year. Before I start, I'd like to acknowledge my co-authors, Emeritus Professor Jackie Wren, who's somewhere around here, and Dr. John Morton. Now, basically, why do we actually need to conduct a study like that? Now, there is a heightened awareness and a growing concern in regards to the use of euthanasia as a population control strategies in shelters and pounds. And at the same time, there's very little comprehensive statistics in regards to the numbers of animals that are entering our pounds and shelters in Australia. And, in terms of euthanasia rates, is a big question mark there, even though Death Row Pets have actually estimated on their website that about 250,000 animals are being euthanized on a yearly basis. So the aim of my research study is to determine on a state and national basis, are we able to get data, and how good are these data sources? So we developed a methodology to actually estimate the numbers of dogs entering pounds, shelters, and rescue groups in 2012 to 2013, and basically looked at the outcome rates of these dogs on a national, state, and agency basis. Okay, how do we go about doing that? So we had to collate and analyze available data. So we have to identify the agency. So basically, these would include our state agencies, basically your municipal councils, as well as the major welfare organizations. Now, these will be the major shelters with physical facilities to house dogs. And usually, these are the shelters taking in more than 1,000 dogs on a yearly basis. And of course, they're smaller branches. And of course, we are looking at the rescue groups as well. And unfortunately, for the rescue groups, we're only able to get comprehensive data from New South Wales. And we will use that data to actually impute numbers from the other states. The categories of interest that we are looking at in terms of data will be the dog intake, reclaim, rehome, transfers, and euthanized. And of course, we are also looking at unclaimed admissions, looking at the proportion that were rehomed and the proportion that were euthanized, because these would actually reflect on how effective the rehoming strategies are. So basically, for the major welfare organizations, pretty straightforward. Most of their annual reports are online, so we're able to get hold of data pretty easily. We checked websites as well. We also looked at government reports, and New South Wales is the only state that actually had comprehensive statewide pound statistics that's collated and published in a report on a regular basis. And of course, we consulted journal articles. It's hidden there, but it's there. And for agencies that we're not able to get data from, what we did was we contacted them directly via email or by phone. Now, so what have we found so far? So out of 515 possible sources of data, mainly your councils and your major organizations, we were able to get information from 58% of the councils and 95% of the welfare organizations. What does this mean? So we have a huge gap in terms of council data. So 42% of the council data was just missing. So we developed an algorithm to account for the missing council data. And basically, this is based on a set of assumptions. Now, for those who are interested, the algorithm is actually available in the paper, which I think you would have been given access to. For the rescue groups, as mentioned, there are so many, it's logistically difficult to actually get information from each and every one of them. So New South Wales actually collated rescue group data, and Justice for Max, an animal advocacy group in New South Wales, actually managed to get hold of these statistics informally through a Right to Information Act, and they have kindly shared that with us. So from the statistics that we have received, we are able to conclude that there is generally, amongst the rescue group, a 2% euthanasia, which means that you're looking at a life release rate of 98%. And in our paper, we will make the assumption that no dogs for the rescue groups are transferred or reclaimed. And by law, they are not supposed to reclaim dogs anyways. So let's look at the findings proper. Now, on a national basis, nationally, we have estimated about 211,655 dogs entering pounds, shelters, and rescue groups in 2012 to 13. And out of this total, 48% were reclaimed, 31% rehomed, giving us a life release rate of 79% or a euthanasia rate of 21%. Now, out of the unclaimed admissions, 60% went to homes, 40% were put down. Now, in terms of contributions of the different agencies to this national total, you can see that the council actually contributed more than half to the national intake. Now, looking at the reclaim column, it is interesting to note that the councils and other welfare agencies combined, their reclaim rate were comparable, so at 52 and 53%. This is indicative of the number of pound contracts that's been outsourced to welfare agencies. So a lot of the welfare agencies are actually running pound services for the councils. Now, in terms of life release, councils and the major shelters, there's not a lot of significant difference, with the exception of the rescue group with their 98% life release rate. And it's the same for the euthanasia. Again, it's comparable across councils and major welfare organizations, with the rescue groups, doing euthanizing 2% of their intake. Now, how about transfers? So as expected, the councils would be transferring the highest proportion. So they do transfer 31% of unclaimed admissions to welfare organizations. So for the welfare organization, they transferred 4% to other organizations. And as mentioned earlier, rescue groups are assumed in this paper not to have any transfers. Now, New South Wales. Now, as mentioned, New South Wales were able to get collated comprehensive data, so we did not have to actually impute any council data. So as you can see, the first column, the agencies that actually contributed to the state total, we have our councils, RSPCA and Animal Welfare League, which are the major organizations in that state, and of course our rescue group pooled. Now that gives us a state total of 7.7 dogs per 1,000 residents. And out of this state total, 37% were reclaimed, 33% rehomed, giving us a life release rate of 71% versus a euthanasia rate of 29%. Now, of the unclaimed admissions, we have 54% going to home and 46% euthanized. Now, it's interesting to note that New South Wales actually had the lowest intake of dogs on a per capita basis at 7.7 dogs per 1,000 residents, but they had the highest euthanasia rate at 29%. Now, Victoria, we had to impute about 5% of the council data, as mentioned, because of the fact that we had missing information from some of the councils. And as such, your state total was 9.7 dogs per 1,000 residents. Now, I'm just going to focus on the life release rate and the euthanasia rate, because otherwise we'll be here the whole day. So you can see the life release rate for Victoria is actually 86% versus a euthanasia rate of 14%. South Australia, we are able to actually get pooled data from the Dog and Cat Management Board. Now, from the pooled data that we have gotten, which is a combination of council and shelter stats, what happened was we subtracted the data from the major organization, which is RSPCA, which is available online, and AWL, which they have provided to us on request. So that's how we actually got hold of our council data. So that gives us a state total of 9 dogs per 1,000 residents, with a live release rate of 79% versus a euthanasia rate of 21. Now, ACT is pretty straightforward. There's only one state pound, and they have provided information to us on request. And the major organization, welfare organization in ACT is actually RSPCA, which is, again, conveniently available online. So this gives us a state total that is similar to South Australia at 9.2 dogs per 1,000 residents, with the highest live release rate across states at 89%, and the lowest euthanasia rate of at 11%. Queensland, we had to impute 17% of the council data, which gives us a state total of 11.2 dogs per 1,000 residents, and a live release rate of 80% versus a euthanasia rate of 20. Now, Northern Territory, again, we had to impute 6% of the council data. Northern Territory had the highest dog intake on a per capita basis at 13.1 dogs per 1,000 residents, and a live release rate of 81% versus a euthanasia rate of 19. Western Australia, we had to impute 100% because they had 140 councils. We only managed to get information from 9 of them. And basically, you know, there were situations where they shared pounds and they shared ranger services, which makes it hard for us to actually get accurate data. As such, we actually basically assumed that the shelter and pound statistics were the same per 1,000 residents as the other states pooled, and then subtracted the known welfare organization and the estimated numbers for the rescue groups to get our council data. So I'm not going to show any Western Australia stats here. Now, Tasmania, we had 31% of council data being imputed, and we had a state total of 10.5 dogs per 1,000 residents, which gives us a second highest live release rate across the state of 88%, and a second lowest euthanasia rate of 12% across the states. Now, trends over time, as you can see here, we have used New South Wales because of comprehensive data over the year 2009 to 12. And we have the state agencies as well as the major organizations. And you can see from the intake and the euthanasia that there is a downward trend. Now, basically, studies have shown a correlation between intake and euthanasia rate, which is really interesting. So basically, the positive correlation suggests that instead of focusing on strategies to reduce euthanasia, maybe we should be focusing on strategies to reduce intake. So less dogs coming in, less dogs getting euthanized. Limitation of this study is not perfect. We have problems, obviously, with availability and quality of data. Certain categories actually give us problems. So transfers, we have issues with dogs moving across shelters, across states. This actually resulted in double admissions or discrepancy in accurate data reporting. We have another category, other outcomes, where dogs in foster care died in shelters, escaped, dogs that were there before reporting time, dogs that were there after reporting time. All these causes discrepancy in accurate data reporting. And of course, we have not included agencies with less than 1,000 dog intake yearly. And not to mention the stray dog population that's being managed by AMRIC in Northern Territory that has not been included in this study as well, because they don't have physical facilities. So we had to narrow down to what we can actually work with. And the actual fact that we had to extrapolate or impute or estimate missing data actually itself, based on a set of assumptions, causes problems, because as we know, assumptions are not always correct. We did actually surface key findings of the studies, okay? So obviously, we don't have readily accessible data. We don't have centralized national data, nor are any data actually publicly available. State-wise, only New South Wales able to provide us collated data, and at the time of writing we only had access to data that was in 2011 to 12, and from what I understand, the latest report is made available just 1 to 2 months ago. We had limited transparency and approachability. Now, South Australia had pooled data, but that was not available publicly. We had to actually request for it. Right to Information Act, too much money, too long, and it's only applicable to councils. Now, certain factors have been surfaced from these studies. Well, two I want to talk about. One of it is culture differences. Now, in regards to the indigenous communities in Northern Territory, they had the highest intake at 13.1 dogs per thousand residents. They had also one of the highest reclaim rate at 61%. Now, this is a community that has a higher proportion of indigenous population, 30% as compared to 13% of the national population. So possibly, cultural differences could have impacted on attitudes towards, basically containment, and impacted on wandering behavior of the dogs. But there's obviously a high sense of ownership in this state, looking at the reclaim rates. So as mentioned, the other thing that has been brought up by Megan, basically about types of management practices, microchipping and registration has been shown to facilitate reclaim rates. So it helps with the identification of dogs, something to consider. Returning on site, okay, so Northern Territory actually practices, what they do is they pick up the dog, they recognize the dog is microchipped, they return it to the owner straight away. So this cuts down on intake of dogs into pounds and shelters. Recommendations: domestic animal plan for councils, as in Victoria. This helps with standardization of categories. It helps with detailed admission data. We get to actually kind of like pin down, are we looking at owner surrender versus stray, okay? Are we looking at what's the microchip status, what's the DSEC status? We have to include euthanasia requests as well as part of the intake. Rescue groups, we don't undervalue them. Okay, they are an effective alternative to improving life release rate and reducing euthanasia. The foster network actually expands, the potential adoption possibilities beyond the vicinity of the shelters itself, and they can provide, behavior modification, in a home care environment. And last but not least, sharing of effective strategies. Okay. We have noticed in the course of our study, some agencies outperform others in certain categories. So there must be something they're doing right. And these are things that, that could be shared, and, it could actually help everybody do better. Thank you very much.